Okay, it's a couple ticks after 10. We are recording, and over to you, Mayor Bynum.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, 10 a.m. And this is the regularly scheduled City Council work session. Yesterday was a holiday. And that's the reason we're having our work session on a Tuesday. And as we always do with work sessions, we jump right into our agenda. We have 6 specific items on our agenda this morning. We have a pretty full agenda. But first up, we have a child care survey needs assessment presentation. And I will turn it over to the city's assistant manager, Ann Morgenthaler, for an introduction.
Good morning, thank you. I'm happy to present a small amount of information about the Uncompadre Valley Alliance proposal for child care needs assessment. We have members of the Uncompadre Valley Alliance here, and they'll share more information with you, so I'll keep mine brief. But as is described in the memo, this group of community members has an idea for a needs assessment here in our Montrose community. And they've been working with other partners in the community as well to share information about this proposal and are here to share it with you today. So just to be clear, staff hasn't been working in tandem on this yet. Really, these members are here to share information with you and see if the city supports this idea. And then staff will take direction from you if you'd like us to do anything. And I think that they'll be asking for some funding support for this proposal as well. This item is not budgeted in the 2021 budget because we didn't know about this opportunity. So to be clear about that as well. And obviously the city manager is here and Keaney is here if you'd like to talk about any financial implications of that. And if there are no questions for me, I'm happy to kick it over to our guests.
Thank you, Ann. I'll go ahead, and I believe that Kevin Williams is going to start and speak and introduce his group. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams, for being here.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Mayor Bynum. So good morning. My name is Kevin Williams, and my spouse and I have lived in Montrose for 37 years, and I'm a member of the UVA Child Care Caucus. Our daughter was born and raised here, and we know from experience how important quality, affordable childcare is to working families and to the economic well-being of our community. I want to thank the City Council and Ann Morgenthaler for providing this opportunity for us to make the case for a needs assessment. The members of our Child Care Caucus have invested hundreds of volunteer hours in this campaign because we care deeply about the community and improving the lives of children and families. 2 other members of our Child Care Caucus will speak this morning, and I'd now like them to briefly introduce themselves. Carol Keaney and Rachel Valerio.
I'm Carol Keaney, and I graduated from high school in Nucla a long time ago. And after 35 years of being a bilingual teacher and a community organizer in California and Texas, I came home to the Western Slope about 5 years ago and am happy here in Montrose. And I am also a member of the UVA Child Care Caucus.
And I am Rachel Valerio. I'm from Littleton, Colorado originally. My husband was born and raised here. Both of his parents are retired Montrose educators, and we got the opportunity to make our way back here about 3 years ago with our 2 children. I'm a licensed in-home child care provider here in Montrose and also a member of the UVA Child Care Caucus.
Great, thanks, Carol. Thank you, Carol and Rachel. Molly Fitzpatrick is also here with us today. She's the managing director and co-founder of Root Policy Research and the consultant with whom we have been working to design a proposal for a Montrose County Child Care Needs Assessment, which is in your packets. In addition, 5 members of our Child Care Caucus are listening in this morning. Jan Gabehart, Elgene Greenacre, Raina Waddell, Miriam Campagna with Bright Futures, and Nancy Henry. Our presentation is planned for about 15 minutes. with 15 minutes allotted for questions, and we're going to cover quite a lot of information and appreciate your understanding. Just a quick word about who UVA is. So the Uncompadre Valley Alliance is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for about 40 years. We're a local affiliate of the Western Colorado Alliance. Our members have worked successfully over the years to protect Western slope water, advocate for smart growth, fight for consumers and small business owners, and build an economy that works for us all. Over the last 2 years, we have had conversations with over 200 people in the county, from Olathe to Montrose to the West End, including parents, teachers, childcare providers, and many others. Recently, we held 4 small group conversations with 22 parents in the city, including 13 in the Hispanic community. Our goal in conducting these conversations was to listen and learn more about the pressures and that keeping families from meeting their basic needs, We learned a tremendous amount. To no one's surprise, one issue that came up time and time again was childcare. Our organization met with Kathleen Merritt, who's the executive director of Bright Futures for Early Childhood and Families, and we have forged a strong partnership with them. Bright Futures, as you may know, is the Early Childhood Council here in the region that's dedicated to improving the lives of children and families in the San Juan region. And at Bright Futures' recommendation, we began to work with Root Policy Research because of their expertise and experience conducting child care needs assessments. I'd now like to turn it over to Carol Keaney to talk a little bit more about why we believe the needs assessment is so important for our community.
So I was trying to share an outline that would help you kind of follow along here, and I can't quite manage to do that.
Lisa, could you make Carol a co-host? I think that might solve the issue with her not being able to share. So when you click on the share screen little green button at the bottom, Ms. Keaney.
Yeah, I think it's something on mine because it's asking me to open my system preferences.
And Ms. Keaney, would you like me to share that outline?
Yeah, if you could just share it, that would be great. Thank you. So she'll get that up. We thought that it might help you kind of follow along. But so let me just start out here. I think that we all recognize that there are issues, we could even call it a crisis, around childcare here in Montrose. We're not alone in that, but this one's ours. And I'd like to share with you 3 reasons why we think that this childcare needs assessment is the next step that we need to take as a community to address these issues. Thank you. And if you could go down to the next page, that'd be great. Perfect. Thank you. So the first reason has to do with the fact that we know the importance of quality early childhood development because it's well documented. This affects every individual person. More than 90% of our brain development occurs in the first 5 years of life. And it also has long-term effects on our community because these early years are when children begin to learn how to play nice with others, how to express themselves, and listen to others with respect, these being basic building blocks for effective community engagement later in life. So that's our first reason. We acknowledge the importance. And the second reason is that we need accurate data about childcare in Montrose. Right now, Montrose does not have this kind of data. And from all of our conversations, we have lots and lots of questions. So for instance, What kind of care do parents want for their children ages 0 to 5? Do stay-at-home moms and dads, do they do that because they want to, because they can't afford childcare, or because they can't find an opening? And are they satisfied with the care that they have, whether that be unlicensed friends and family and neighbors, whether that be a licensed home childcare or a licensed childcare center? And if they're not satisfied, what keeps them from accessing what they really want for their children? What is affordable at different income levels? Do the hours of service that are available fit their work schedule? And how is the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, working for low-income parents? And what about our providers? Is there a gap between what providers need to charge in order to make a living and what parents can afford to pay? What are the challenges to maintaining a viable childcare business? And who are the friend, family, and neighbor providers in Montrose? What support might they need or want? And how is CCAP working for providers? We need clear, accurate data to answer all of these questions and to guide our decisions. And the third reason we think that this is a really important next step is in order to answer the question, what is the economic impact of our childcare industry on our overall economy? In 2/3 of families, both parents work, and the lack of available and affordable childcare can push parents out of the job market. How is this affecting the Montrose economy? In what other ways are the decisions that parents and providers are forced to make about work and childcare affecting the Montrose economy? We are aware that the city of Montrose recently invested in Smart Start preschool and daycare, and we applaud the city for recognizing the need for more childcare slots. It is our understanding that after being open for about a month, Smart Start was still operating below capacity. Are their rates affordable enough for enough parents to ensure the success of their business? With the findings from this child care needs assessment, we believe that you will have greater confidence that your policy and/or financial decisions will be beneficial to the economic development of our community, while at the same time supporting the needs and desires of our parents and providers. So we have worked with Root Policy Research to design a needs assessment tailored to our questions and our community. And Rachel will now describe that proposal.
Thank you, Carol. And then, so if we can go to the next page there, I think, Anne, should be on there. So as Kevin mentioned, UVA has been working closely with Kathleen Merritt, the Executive Director of Bright Futures, to design a childcare needs assessment with Root Policy Research. So her expertise, along with the stories that we've heard from families here in Montrose, have been vital to the design of the childcare needs assessment. In your packet, you will see the Root Policy Research proposal. It's on page 4. So I'm going to take some time now to just do a brief overview of the proposal, and then you can refer back to it if you need to. Molly Fitzpatrick is here, and she'll be able to answer questions at the end of our presentation. So you'll see that the needs assessment has several sections. The first section will show the perceptions of childcare needs and options here in Montrose. So Root Policy Research will use many different avenues to get at this data and information. They'll conduct background research on existing childcare options and demographic needs. And then they will also conduct household surveys. This will be kind of the biggest piece, or the cornerstone, as Molly calls it, of the project. Many of the questions that Carol brought up, the questions that came up in our community conversations, will be addressed in this part of the project. So you can refer to pages 5 and 6 in your packet to see the details of the survey. Route Policy Research, UVA, and Bright Futures will also work together to promote, distribute, and monitor the survey so that we can adjust outreach efforts to reach all populations. The data analysis will include breakouts for the following subgroups: race, ethnicity, home language, economic level, and CCAP participants. We've developed some pretty good partnerships throughout all of this here in the community. So with the school district, Hispanic Affairs Project, Hilltop Family Resource Center, Black Canyon Child Care Association, and the Montrose County CCAP office that we'll be able to utilize in order to ensure the return of enough surveys from each of those subgroups that were mentioned, and then in order to produce valid data in all of those areas. Route Policy Research will also conduct licensed provider interviews, and that should be on page 6 in your packet, or it's page 3 of the proposal. They will also conduct non-licensed provider focus groups. So this includes those caregivers that are family, friends, neighbors, nannies, or non-licensed providers that are watching less than 5 children. And we're feeling this is a pretty important group to reach. According to the 2019 Head Start Assessment Report, there are estimated 2,689 children 5 years and younger in Montrose. And we know that about only 500 of those are using licensed care. So that shows us that the rest of these children are in the care of these non-licensed providers. So these focus groups with these providers will be giving us valuable information. Then the next part, Route Policy Research, can also provide some additions to the scope of the assessment. And as a team, we've decided that we would like to include these. The first will be a detailed demographic and commuter analysis. They will also give us demand modeling and projections, which will project the demand for services over the next 5 and 10 years by age, type of care, and income level. Another important piece will be an assessment of economic impact in Montrose, which will review the economic and social benefits of early childhood care to the community, along with negative impacts of inadequate early childhood care. And last, Route Policy Research will provide recommendations for addressing the childcare needs and gaps here in Montrose. So as you can see, Route Policy has a solid proposal that will provide valuable information regarding childcare here in Montrose. We've also included more information about Route Policy Research and an example of a needs assessment that they completed in Clear Creek County in your packet. So making this study possible requires a financial investment. So I'm now going to pass it over to Kevin, and he will explain our work to raise the money.
Thank you, Rachel. And we're almost there, so hang in there, everybody. So the cost of the needs assessment is $38,950. And that includes all of the things that Rachel reviewed and more. And that figure is the same as Route Policy Research's budget, which is on page 5 of the proposal in your packet. The county has already committed $15,000, viewing it as a good investment of their funds. And Sarah Fishering with the RE1J School District has secured $5,000 from the Colorado Trust. So we have $20,000 already raised towards the budget. We respectfully request that the City of Montrose invest $18,950 in the needs assessment, which would allow us to contract with Route Policy Research and begin moving ahead with the design of the survey and distribution plan as quickly as possible. We understand that the city has already adopted its 2021 budget, but nonetheless may have some flexibility to approve our request. And we apologize for the timing and inconvenience, but hope you will understand that navigating this pandemic has set our work back for several months. We will be sure to partner with and recognize the city for its outstanding leadership once we meet our fundraising goal and after the needs assessment is completed. Again, we're asking the city to consider investing $18,950. And finally, we understand you will not be making a decision today, and we want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So I'm going to turn it back to Rachel for Q&A. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So we just want to open up to you now and see if we can answer any questions. And then Molly is here as well to help us with questions about the proposal.
I see that Councilor Frank has his hand up.
Thank you.
Due to our current political climate, I wanted to be very, very clear that the interaction with the non-licensed care providers is not going to be any attempt to penalize them for not having licenses, to make sure that that's very clear, not only to the staff and council, but also to the public that is watching this, that the survey is only to gain information on how to provide help for those individuals. Is that correct?
That is correct. And Molly, I don't know if you want to speak more to this because I think you've addressed that before.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rachel. So I completely agree. Our viewpoint is that non-licensed providers provide a very valid component of the child care infrastructure. And so our goal, and we've done this in other studies as well, is really talking to them about what resources do you need, what would be helpful, what are you hearing from parents? And so it's really much more about just making sure we understand the entire landscape than it is about steering families or providers into any particular choice. We're just trying to gather information on what those choices are and what other constraints may be impacting those choices, as well as resources for providers. So I totally agree, but great point.
Thank you.
I'm looking at my fellow counselors for any hands, and until I see some, I will pose to you the same question I asked when I first met with you all, which is how can you do a very accurate survey given that we've had 10 months of COVID? And I feel like any survey I personally take right now, I ponder, well, do you want my answer for the last 10 months or do you want what my answer would have been normally? So perhaps you can speak to how you adjust for that.
So I'll jump in, but defer to anyone from UVA if you want to speak as well. So I agree, now is a tricky time to survey. We've been consistently doing surveys. We also work in a lot of other community development elements around housing and some other components, all of which have been impacted by COVID. So we are really working hard to design our surveys to be very clear. There are times where we ask the question twice and say, okay, first answer this question from the last 6 months or now the last year. Now answer the same question as you would have answered it in 2019 or before COVID hit. So we are working to adapt our surveys to acknowledge that. The precise ways that we do that will depend to some extent on when we decide to launch the survey. And that's something we're still working with UVA on what's going to be best in terms of when we capture kind of the perspective. And so we'll continue, that's in flux now because it does depend on the timing, but I totally agree. We will design the questions to be very clear because our goal here is not just to understand, pandemic impacts on childcare, of which there are many, but it's really to understand what is the long-term need for the county. So we really want to forecast that over the next 5 years, which we assume will not be all pandemic impacted. And so we want to understand those nuances. We're taking the long view here, not just a short kind of look at what's happened in the past year. So hopefully that answers your question. And we will provide drafts of the survey for UVA to review. And that's part of our process. We don't just say, okay, great, you gave us money, now we're going to do everything we want. So we work in an iterative process as we design the survey to make sure that those questions are clear and look for feedback from the client on that as well.
Great, thank you. That does answer my question. I see that Mayor Pro Tem Glassball has his hand up.
One of the questions I have is this a commercial business that you're running to do these surveys, or how is this being funded otherwise?
So Root is we are an S Corp. We are based in Denver. And so we are a commercial business. The vast majority of our clients are public sector clients. So we work almost exclusively for local government contracts. And so we are a private enterprise, but we work almost exclusively in the public sector.
Well, I don't know. I don't mean this to be negative, but at what point do we start separating government from private entity in doing business? It just seems like to me we're right on that borderline of funding private industry. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I do. We hire private industry all the time to provide us with vehicles, to survey our streets, I mean, this is nothing new where government contracts out with businesses who are experts in their industry. I mean, we've done surveys in-house before. We had an intern in the city manager's office do a survey one summer, and I think you get what you pay for. I mean, he did a good job kind of asking some local businesses about stuff, but it is in no way the kind of comprehensive survey that's professionally done that you can see attached in our packet this morning.
Oh.
Councilor Anderson, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time this weekend kind of studying through this. First, I want to say, before I ask my questions and tell you my thoughts, that I am wholeheartedly in support of childcare incentives, having more, understanding it better, all of those things. I acknowledge it's a key part of economic development because people can't move here for jobs if they have children and they can't get childcare. So I get all that. In light of that, I was trying to figure out who is really the intended audience of this study. And you made a mention about city policy and collecting data so that we can formulate city policy. And so I went through and studied the Clear Creek report that you put in our packet. And I would have to assume that ours will be somewhat similar. I also assume that the statistics they studied there are very appropriate in a proportional fashion to Montrose and to our county. I mean, you know, such population's different, but the situation's pretty similar. Recreation is one of our key industries, et cetera. And so I looked through that, and to be really honest, for $20,000 or for $40,000, it seems like they're pretty much telling us what we already know. The obvious, of course, we have a shortage of childcare. Of course, if the population's going to grow, we're going to need more. And I think our city's policy is pretty well focused already on doing what we can. You know, we're not going to have a city childcare department, and we're not going to have our own child service for kids to come and, you know, that's not a city government job. But we are providing incentives. As you mentioned, we gave $30,000 to get, and I'd rather take this money, my personal opinion is, I'd rather take $20,000 or $40,000 and use it as incentives for people who want to start a business in childcare. And rather than study and get all this data, and then what am I going to do with it? I mean, are we going to put it on a website so people will want to move here and start a childcare business? I think if they want to move here, they already, you know, and Region 10 has a whole program for small businesses. There's a childcare, forget the right words, but there's a part of the SBDC that is focused on childcare. So there's all kinds of resources available. And I'm just having trouble figuring out as a, you know, as a person responsible for our citizens' treasury, if you will, is this a wise use of our money? And I'm struggling to figure out why it is.
I can speak to that. So you guys do a great job of the incentives program, and we love that you've expanded to childcare. So the problem with that is, though, that incentive that went to that childcare went to a childcare that's now not full. So we're saying we have a childcare crisis in Montrose and parents can't find spots. So we opened a brand new childcare that's not full. So we incentivized this childcare, which was great. But with this data, we can look and see, okay, our parents actually are looking for childcare they can afford and childcare that maybe they're looking for a home provider, or maybe they're looking for different types of care. So this data will be able to, as the city, you'll be able to, okay, we need to focus our incentives on these types of childcares.
But if you were the manager of that, wouldn't you think that's your responsibility to figure out why I'm not getting flooded with business? I mean, I don't see it as my job as a city to go tell the smart, whatever the name of that outfit is, what they're doing wrong. I mean, that's their job to figure that out. And
right.
the same with every other child care in Montrose. And if you're a smart entrepreneur and you decide, boy, look at all these childcare businesses making mistakes, I'll create one. I mean, that's what free enterprise is all about. So, and if this study is going to help someone come here and start a business that wouldn't have otherwise come here, well, I don't see how it does that, but that would be a great purpose. But I don't see it as being a valuable tool to city government to help us to design policies, because I think we've already got good policies, and I can't tell you why that smart childcare service isn't doing a good job, but I don't see it as my job to even figure that out.
I do think that's our job. If we can give $30,000 of taxpayer money to a business, and then for whatever reason that business isn't working, I think we need to know, are they charging too much money? Should we have, to begin with, asked what are your range going to be as far as charging people? Is there any kind of sliding scale for people that don't make as much money? We know how bad the wages are in this town. No, I think that part of what we need to find out is more information about what is affordable for housing or for childcare. And again, if we can give somebody $30,000 and we don't follow up like a geyser kind of thing, what are we doing with the taxpayer money?
Right. I would agree with Mr. Bowman. In fact, when we gave that money to that business, it was CARES Act money. It had to be done rather quickly. We said, I wish we had more information about childcare and where exactly the need is. But we know that at this point in time, we can make a difference on this particular business and open up more slots. But we need to know more about the whole industry. And I think it isn't just to guide the decisions the city makes. Perhaps even more importantly, it might guide the decisions the county makes, and they hold the ability to increase the number of CCAP spots, and they hold the ability to increase the CCAP reimbursement rates. And if we learn as a community that those two things need to be done at the county level, I will have been proud that the city could be part of understanding that issue more. So it isn't just our policies, it's decisions region-wide at the county level. I see Councilor Frank has his hand up.
Okay, good points.
Well, I would agree with Mayor Bynum that one of the things that I look at this, and the thing that I mentioned before, is the non-licensed home providers. My sister-in-law and my mother-in-law watch my granddaughters. They also watch my niece's my kids, and a lot of the things that I would like to see more information on is how our community can best provide support for those non-licensed home care providers. And that's where I see value in this, Mr. Henderson, is that we're looking at something that we do have good policies, we do have good incentives. Are those incentives in the right place?
Right.
Are those policies being applied to the right people? And that's where I see this as being valuable, is because it can provide us information on how to better focus our efforts and monies, and also to perhaps give us an insight into availability of other monies that we are not aware of right now.
Right. And also our school district policies. You know, if we found that most people who were doing unlicensed at-home care, let's say with grandma, are really quite happy with that. That would be interesting. If we found that they would prefer a early childhood center through the school district, or they would prefer a private child care center, or they would prefer a licensed in-home. Like, I just think we could know a lot more about it. And I think we're pretty lucky that we have this local advocacy group that has spent countless volunteer hours and has fundraised more than half the money already. And we can benefit from the results of this survey for pitching in less than half of the cost. This is something we could never have done in-house. We could have taken a stab at it. We could have asked with the school district to send out a survey, but to get this kind of a professional survey done, 6 months ago when we said we needed to know more about it, I think we would have considered ourselves lucky to have this come along.
I love too, Mayor Bynum, that you've brought up all of the county, the city, the school district. I mean, we've developed through these conversations so many wonderful partnerships that we can all tackle this together. So this is not just that we want to change city policies. This is that as a community, we want to change the way we deal with childcare and the way we help families have what they need so they can go to work, so they can, so children are raised in a way that to become productive citizens here in our own community. So I love that you brought up all these different entities, because we are really trying to build that partnership, because if we all work together, then we can make bigger changes.
I've got one quick question, and that is the final work product. Is that going to be available for anyone who wants it? The school district, the city, the county. I'd hate to see the work product locked up. So I've seen a lot of nodding heads. I think that's a sufficient answer, honestly. And I want to hear from Mayor Pro Tem Glassbell, because I think he might be the only counselor that we haven't necessarily heard weigh in.
I still have a little concern. I understand what the program can do, but I'm just still not comfortable with it. I'll have to work on it and think about it for a while.
It sounds like in a work session, we usually try and decide whether this is something the city should go forward with. And I'm seeing or hearing that we have a majority of council that would like to explore this further, and perhaps all of council who'd like to know a little more, as opposed to taking this off the table completely. So should we ask our city staff to continue to work with, or to really begin working, honestly, UVA has just brought this, to begin working with UVA and to really bring, I suppose, an ask for money to council at a formal city council work session? What do you guys want to see? Not a work session, city council meeting. What do my fellow councilors want to see? Do they want to hear more about where in our reserves do we have the money? Councilor Frank.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd like to see a little bit more information about where we could pull money from to fund this if we choose to go forward with that. I would also like to, a little bit of clarification that the point of this survey isn't to provide information for business owners specifically, although they would be able to benefit from it because the work product would be unrestricted. Just in the same way that I don't think that the survey results are specific to formulating city policy. Mm-hmm. I would say that overall, I see this as an opportunity to get better information, period, on an issue that we all deem as fairly critical. And right now with the COVID restrictions in place, that's impacting a lot of businesses, that daycares that are having to shut down because of exposure, daycares that are having to shut down because of capacity levels. And I think that this entire survey would give us a lot better information to move forward. And so in that case, I would really love to see a little bit more information on the availability of who would be available to provide this information and where our funding would come from. So I would like to see it come forward myself.
Do we need to do another work session where Shani Wittenberg tells us that we have this money in reserves, or can we quickly ask her now? Do we have $18,950 in unbudgeted reserves? Can we afford this, so to speak?
Yes, that is correct. We would have undesignated fund balance available to cover this $18,950 if that is the council's desire.
Does council want to talk about it more at another work session or bring it forward with a vote at an upcoming city council meeting?
I'm comfortable with going forward.
Okay.
I'll support going forward with some additional information too.
Okay, do you all feel like you can seek that information out and it can be provided in our council packet when we vote on it? Or you can seek out, if you have a specific question about the survey or a specific question from Shani, that you can get your answers prior to a council meeting and vote? I'm seeing nodding.
I'd like to see some of the financial information in our packet as well, please.
Okay. Okay, so understanding that we really how we can afford it and seeing that in our packet when we vote on it. But you're comfortable putting this on a council agenda to vote on. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've gone over a little bit of our time. Yeah, Mr. Anderson, sorry.
I just wanted to say in the packet, maybe a clear definition of what our study, what its contents will be. The Clear Creek study is very detailed, and I just would like to sort of see an outline in the packet of what our study, what its contents will be.
Like, are we getting that same kind of content when we buy it, or are we getting a light version of that, like a software program? You know, you see all the bells and whistles, but those were all things that they paid a lot more for. Or will our report look similar? That's okay. That's a great question. I'm sure they can include that information.
Yep, and I can just answer that quickly. The Clear Creek is a very similar scope, similar budget. You would get a comparable product, but it would obviously be tailored to Montrose. But yes, similar, all the same bells and whistles.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that we, in the interest of time, need to wrap this up. I would assume, Mr. Williams, that you have some closing remarks and you'd like to thank council for their time. So I will turn it over to you, but I ask that you just keep it brief.
I think Rachel has those.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we just wanted to thank you real quick for your time and attention today. And we're appreciative for that time because we know that's valid. We also just want to encourage you to approve the $18,950 as needed so that we can contract with Root Policy as soon as possible and kind of get things going. So, and if you would just be in contact with us on whether or not this is on your February 2nd City Council, that would be helpful as well.
And I think I will ask our staff, is it possible to put this on our February 2nd City Council meeting? I'm seeing some nodding, so I think we'll go forward with that plan unless we run into some kind of a scheduling or a agenda snag.
I will confirm with Lisa Del Piccolo, and then we'll be back in touch with you all on UVA.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone from UVA. UVA, I keep wanting to call it the Uncompadre Valerio Education Association, and I know that's not it. UVA for joining us, and for Molly from Root Policy Research for joining us for our council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, before you jump to the next topic, I just want to make one quick statement. So there was some discussion over the investment we made in that Smart Start daycare. And it seemed like some people were saying they're not successful at the moment, or they haven't complied with everything we wanted with our investment of funds. And I don't want anybody listening to that discussion to think that's the case, because it isn't true. So I posted in the chat a link to their website with all of their pricing plans. You can also access all their staff and all their programmatic options on their website. And they have moved forward exactly how they told us they were going to move forward. So I just want to make sure there's no misunderstandings by anybody watching the meeting or anybody on the call that they haven't done what they told the city they were going to do. They've done everything that we asked them to do. And as we move forward, it's very similar to housing. we have to include both discussions related to CCAP or subsidized daycare and free market workforce daycare. Two totally different price points and two totally different markets. And so any kind of study, it would be really important to make sure we're tapping into both of those needs, not just one or the other, very similar to the discussions we've had related to housing.
Thank you. And I think that's important. You brought that up. I appreciate that. Okay. Thank you very much. Those folks can drop off. That'll let us focus on Mr. Murphy. As I turn it over to him, I'd like to thank, first of all, the video was great. And I really want to encourage anyone in the community who wants to understand more about this. I think if our work sessions were 4 hours long, we'd have you do that whole presentation at a work session. But the idea that you did it as a standalone video, I thought was great, and I appreciate that. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the Woodgate Road Realignment Project.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm assuming everybody was able to see the video without any problem. Seeing head nods, so great. That was in lieu of an open house. Usually we would give that type of presentation and then meet, but because we can't meet, we're doing it through email. So appreciate everyone taking a look at that. That'll save some time today because I won't dive too deep into that. I will dive into some of the supplemental questions and information that's come out since then. So today is kind of intended to be the rest of the story. So we'll go through some of the stuff that's come up since then, but also what that means for council as far as actions going forward to get us to construction of the Woodgate realignment project. For anybody listening, I direct a lot of this information is available. We've created a web page specific to this project within our Moving Montrose Forward webpage. So if you go to movemo.co, so not .com, but .co, you can find a lot of this information there because we'll go through it pretty quickly. The idea is to kind of get you guys up to speed on everything else. Essentially we've been working on this for about a year now on all these land issues, all the land acquisitions. And now we've gotten to a point where these are public. And so, if it feels like 8 months of information, that's because it is. Usually this stuff would come more routinely, but a lot of it, we didn't know what shape it was going to take until we've gotten to this point. So with that introduction, I think I'll dive into screen sharing and start talking a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts details. Please feel free. So when I'll mute myself so you don't have to stare at the top of my head, but I'll put you on the side. So feel free hopefully I'll see your hand raised, but if not, feel free to interrupt me too if any questions come up as we go along. So let's see here, that button, and just one more button here, sorry. Okay, so this is, right now I'm just sharing the information that's in the council packet. So I'll scroll down to the realignment overview. I think that's where a lot of our discussions will focus. So since releasing that press release, I wanted to go over some of the kind of primary concerns that have been brought up by a lot of the public feedback we've received. I will say in general, in all of my time here, I've never seen the community so excited for a project. All the feedback we've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. People are pretty excited. Kind of speaks to the issues that we are experiencing in this area when it comes to traffic. But there have been some concerns, and they're valid clarifications / concerns that I wanted to speak to just so for the public's benefit and so you guys are in the loop also. You'll see this as page 73 in your council packet. I put together some FAQs. These are also on the web page, and I'll just speak to them briefly here, but if you want more of that information, they are available online. One of the first questions was clarifying that this intersection here at the intersection of Woodgate and Townsend, that it will be closed. And the answer to that is yes. We looked at trying to keep the road over here and get an intersection here, and it just doesn't work from a traffic flow standpoint. So what you have is people zigzagging across here, stacking back to get here. You guys have probably all seen how this can get so many cars stacked up behind it that you can queue up to here. And so with an intersection that close to another intersection, you can have cars that spill out onto Townsend, you can have cars that spill out through this intersection and really just kind of mess the whole thing up. So functionally, this will operate just like any other alternate route to Townsend. So it'll be fed by the main arterials. So East Oak Grove is one, but there's also several dotted along. So Venture Way by Denny's, Ogden, and Odell. You know, 2 of those have lights. If you include Oak Grove, 3 of those have lights. All kind of become the primary access points to this road. And so what we expect to see is some redistribution of traffic. So people will learn, you know, if you want to go north on Townsend, you're coming down Woodgate, you'll probably, and even I do this now, you'll probably peel off on Venture or Odell ahead of time so you don't end up in this queue down here. Because, you know, right now hanging a left on Oak Grove isn't too big of a deal, but as traffic does increase on Oak Grove, that will get harder, and during rush periods, that'll be harder. So we will encourage people, and you know, during the closure, during construction, some of this, people will get into those new habits of using the other available intersections. One thing I mentioned on that video is, you know, none of this is perfect. It's definitely improvement, and it sets us up well for a lot better future improvement, long range. You know, the modeling shows that this is the only way to kind of avoid gridlock in this area. But that being said, you know, it's a tight area, and although an improvement, it's not perfect. So another question is about access to US Bank. So right now you have access points, 2 of them on Oak Grove here, 1 of them on Townsend, and then this kind of de facto access through the parking lot off of Woodgate. This one will be the one that's going away, but all of the others will remain unchanged. So these 2 access points, which is pretty typical for a corner lot, they will remain open throughout this project. Long term, you know, there's no development plans for any of this area yet, but in talking to them, there is a cross-access easement between these 2, so it seems likely that there would be a cross-access easement between these, although that is a private matter that we don't have much control over. But people are using US Bank. We're actually looking at modifying this turn lane also to accommodate this movement a little better, to maintain good access to US Bank, both during and after the project. Other questions, which I'm really excited about this question, actually. We've had a lot.
Mr. Frank, just go ahead and speak up. So.
Yeah, I didn't know if I'd give a chance to look at my hand or not. The one other question I had was, if you look at the intersection across Oak Grove on the west side of Townsend, are we going to do something to realign that area? Because one of the big issues right now is not only the traffic coming across through Woodgate, but also traffic creating that issue, left turns and right turns and through lane on Oak Grove straight across. Is there something in the plans sort of tied to this project to realign that? And I noticed that the occupants of that southern portion are building a new structure, and I was curious if that has anything to do with eliminating that shed that we have on the corner that's kind of impeding our ability.
So yes, so directly with this project, so this project is part of kind of a 5-step program to fix this area. So we have, this is one of my least favorite intersections in town. You know, it's misaligned. You're really constrained on drainage and right of way here. I personally would love to see some work done here. It's going to come down to budget, you know, so realigning that is a pretty substantial project. It does remain on the radar. So, you know, the overall things that are going to fix this intersection long term, you know, the Woodgate realignment, step 1. This roundabout is pretty important. Getting this intersection so that your turn lanes are actually aligned. So right now they're offset and people don't know if they're turning left or not, and creates a pretty, you know, less than ideal situation to navigate through there. But also the extension of Rio Grande. And so getting Rio Grande down to Target takes a lot of pressure off of this intersection also. And, you know, long range in our capital planning efforts, those are all very important to stay ahead of the traffic growth that is occurring. So, you know, shorter answer to your question is right now, you know, because of the property acquisition, this is, I think, owned by the federal government. So you can imagine how fun that process will be. on the radar, but no formal product at this point, but it is something that we definitely keep in our longer range planning efforts. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
You're showing the roundabout on this drawing, but in actuality, that's for future planning, right?
Correct.
Are we going to be setting it up so once we do that roundabout, we don't have to reroute utilities, or are we taking care of that at this time?
Yep. So this project is being set. So there's kind of a utility cluster right here that we're not doing anything with right now, but anything new that we're putting in, we're running back along the back, and that played into this property that we purchased right here. So that when that roundabout does come in, the only thing that sacrificed is this little bit of pavement right here, which is, the cost of those projects pretty insignificant to come back into. So yeah, that was the next one I wanted to speak to. So I'm very excited. I feel like I've been here for 8 years now. We've come a long ways in the roundabout front. So we have a lot of people very adamant that we put in the roundabout now and are asking and pleading for us to put in the roundabout, which is fantastic. I remember the pitchforks on the first one. So that's a good thing. And long range, that is very important to how this will operate. Imagine, people that, especially out of towners or something that are coming through, come down Woodgate, not realizing that they then have to hang a left across Oak Grove. Right now, that's doable and acceptable level of service. We looked at putting in the roundabout now. It adds about another $1 million, but kind of more impactful is it requires some property acquisition with another house that would have to be acquired right here. Between all those efforts, that would have delayed getting the road portion done, which is also a pretty substantial portion of the project. And so kind of the intent was, in order to get this moving, which is an immediate need, let's focus on the road, and there's not that much lost in making this a future project. That also gives us some flexibility in seeing how it operates, seeing how we'll go through and do a traffic study after to look at how the traffic does distribute, and if we need to change signal timings and all that to keep this kind of whole area working well. Because you also don't want to construct infrastructure too early, because once you construct it, you have to maintain it forever. And so we want to find that sweet spot of implementing that at the right time when the needs are met and not before, because it's a pretty substantial investment. So I'm glad to hear that the community wants another roundabout. I think it's a great solution in this application, and it will stay on our capital planning radar, but it will not be constructed initially. And then the FAQs, I did speak to this house purchase. This is the one that has been in some of the online newspapers lately. So this is the one that we're renting now, and then when construction starts, we'll use this as a construction office for the project. And then when that's done, we plan to sell that property after cleaning up some of the property we need on the corner for some of the utility elements. So I think as far as the public feedback, that takes care of that section. Before I dive into right-of-way acquisitions, any questions on project nuts and bolts or traffic patterns or anything like that? Okay. Not seeing any? Okay, I'll keep marching. So probably the biggest element of this project so far has been the project acquisitions. Fortunately, it's a lot of properties that we're crossing, but fortunately, it's only been 2 property owners that we've had to engage, which is good for the project because it's just that way it's easier to make things align and make things work, kind of comprehensively across the area. So the first of those is RDMJK Woodgate Investments, which I'll scroll down to a different figure here that shows colors of property ownership. So this comes out of the MOA with them. All of the green properties are RDMJK property. They owned these 2 houses ahead of the project. They've kind of been wanting to develop this area for a while, and it's just such a complicated area with all of the remnant rights of way, some easements issues, some drainage issues, utility issues, all these things that this project has really served for a catalyst to, I kind of consider it a public-private partnership that we're fixing our problem, but also enabling development in this area. So we kind of get a win-win out of it. So they've been the primary one we engaged with first starting back in March. we got to an agreement, kind of created a memorandum of agreement that we discussed in executive session that created the framework for how this project would be implemented. The main components of that are, we will initially in the county, so we would help them with an annexation application. And the main driver for that is, it's hard for us to do any platting work if you have to clean up property lines, if you have part of it in the city and part of it in the county, so it just adds complication. And it's kind of weird. This has been in the county because it's completely surrounded by city limits. So we helped them with that. They made the application and that was reviewed by council a couple months back. So that part's done. We would take care of the design and construction of the road realignment, which is something we would do anyway as part of a capital project. With that, to kind of, in the past, they had going through this, I learned that Woodgate used to come in straight at an angle across here. You can kind of see the sewer alignment here. So you imagine how nightmarish this intersection is as a four-way. Imagine how fun it was as a five-way. I don't know if anybody was around back then, but I'd imagine it wasn't great. There's a reason they realigned it back to here back then. So what you have is this kind of obsolete portion of right-of-way. There's also an old remnant right-of-way that was dedicated as part of a previous subdivision here. When they thought this road might take a 90 and come through this way. Get my marker sees it. And that essentially becomes obsolete. So we've agreed to vacate those in the name of essentially realigning this right-of-way onto the new street here. With that, we will replat the project area, and we'll discuss these in a little more detail here in a minute. Because once this is realigned, you now have all these kind of remnant parcels that, don't really lend themselves to effective use of this area. So it's a chance to, in one kind of shot, get the road project and all of its right-of-way dedicated, but clean up all of the lines to go with it, which again is something as part of the road project we would have to do in either, no matter which route we go. We would help them rezone this property, so assist them with the applications. So when this is all done, same issue, you'd have lot lines that don't match the zoning lines. And so there's a follow-up project to help them apply to rezone to match what will become the new property boundaries. And that's, again, something that will need to be done anytime you move property lines. You need to make sure that the zoning moves with it or works with it. And then you'll see this does go through two houses here. So those are currently rented out, owned by RDMJK, but rented out. Upon closing on this land deal, those would become ownership of the city, and we would start demolishing them shortly after. So these we won't rent because by the time we close, do the asbestos eval just to see if there is asbestos and abatement if necessary, it will be time to start the road project if everything aligns just right. So, those are part of it. So we'll demolish those with the project. And then the last is the net payment. So, you kind of have, these houses we're purchasing, the land we're purchasing, they're getting a credit back for some of this that is getting realigned this way. So the net payment to RDMJK for essentially all of this framework was $235,000, which is, I think, again, it kind of speaks to the public-private partnership of fitting in well with both their goals and ours at a reasonable rate. So, and then the next one, so the last piece of the land acquisitions was we're crossing a corner of this parcel here on Storm King. And if you zoom in here, the right-of-way itself is just back in this corner. So it ends up being about 2,500 square feet. The house is back here. And the reason for this acquisition is, several drivers. One, the primary is safety. And so to get these curves to work, you can imagine, for the through traffic and volume on Woodgate, these need to be, relatively wide, smooth curves so you don't get, someone were to bring a moving truck or something down here that the trailer isn't trailing behind into the other lane, making safety or visibility issues. So that's part of it. But another part of that is also maintaining usable land for what will remain here. There's so many utilities here. that if we were to keep this too tight, safety is the primary driver, but you also end up with land up here that's essentially unusable kind of orphan land, which is bad for the development, would increase acquisition costs, and then you'd end up with kind of a weed patch right along Townsend frontage in the long range. So those drove the alignment. With that, we worked with this owner. When we do these types of acquisitions, it's pretty common. Like the roundabout we just did at Miami had 6 of these. When we widened East Oak Grove, I think there was 8 different parcels we had to do this. We hire consultants that specialize specifically in right-of-way acquisition work. The reason we do that, there's a lot of laws that surround these kind of things. It's under the Uniform Act. It's the same policies that all the highways and things follow. And it makes sure that the owners are treated fairly and are entitled to every bit that they're entitled to. So that includes appraisals. They have secondary independent appraisals. It covers the land and all of the improvements on it. So, if they have garden beds and sod and sprinkler systems, those kind of things, those all get accounted for in the acquisition. We reached agreement on this one in mid-December. The purchase price for all of that land plus the improvements was $34,000. And that's, there was an article in one of the online newspapers that said $34. I just wanted to clear that up. It was $34,000. We don't go lowballing people. We give them what they're entitled to make sure that they're fairly compensated for the impact of the project. And with that, we will also reset, all of their sprinkler systems, and there's an existing privacy fence here. We'll reset that along the back of the new wall so that they're, the goal is that they're ideally left in an improved state. If nothing, no worse than where they were, and fully compensated for any impacts from the project. So that's how we approach those. So I think I'll move on to the council actions next. Any questions on property acquisitions? Not seen any, okay. Too much detail, too little detail. You guys bored? Good. Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay. I like details, so if you want more, happy to oblige. But so the upcoming council actions, these are mostly in support of the RDMJK memorandum of agreement. The first of those is the vacation ordinance for these 2 remnants. So these 2 purple ones here, shaded here. The form that takes is a kind of single 2-page ordinance. It's the draft of that is in your packet. And then they reference the legal exhibits of what is to be vacated. A kind of unique element of this one is they're being vacated in the name of realignment. So the whole vacation goes to these property owners because they're balancing it back out with new right-of-way here where the road is going to be. And I'll touch more on schedule of when this would hit with all the other project elements. The second piece is the project replat. And so this takes the form of a official act of the city of Montrose. A good reference of one we just did was the Unrein family, or Unrein division, I think, of property was the name of it. And that was a pretty similar deal where it's in the name of supporting a city capital project. So you're just cleaning up property lines to get the right-of-way formalized. There's other ways to do it. You can just do standalone deeds and things of that sort. But what you end up with are, you have this deed that runs through a property and you have the old property triangles left. Then you have title issues because which one takes precedent and all that. Doing it as a plat in this manner makes it very clear. We do the title research, get all encumbrances on the land onto a single document. So it really gives us a powerful protection moving forward, but also the developer similar level of protection that it's very clear how this land can and can't be used going into the future. So that's by council action, so it'd just be a single meeting to approve this, and then the mayor signs it. And this is the document we would take to a essentially a closing event where we sign all of the various kind of back and forth documents of that played into the land deal. One thing I forgot to mention on the acquisitions too is none of this required the use of eminent domain. And I wanted to clear up some misconceptions we hear about that. So eminent domain is a municipality's right to essentially acquire land. I don't want to say forcefully is the word, but acquire land for public purposes. But it's not just something we can just go and take the land. There's still that full process we have to follow by federal statute or federal regulations, and then they're fairly compensated for it. We don't just get the land. They get full market value plus any damages for that. Again, fortunately in this project, and we haven't had to yet in my time, knock on wood, had to go that route. Generally, we've been able to find common ground as we negotiate with these landowners on these types of projects. So did want to make that clear that none of this was an eminent domain action that was done in cooperation with the landowners at fair compensation. So then I'll just dive into, so I guess any questions on what's upcoming for city council action? Nothing? Okay. So then the last is just all of the other project and how these actions fall in with the rest. So if you guys like the detail, this is the current project schedule. So right now we're at the work session talking about the right-of-way vacation ordinance and the project replat. Between now and when you see this again, the rezone, we're going to start the process on that. So the applicant will be applying for a rezone. And then that way, when that's done, these will come back on the same meeting. So we're just trying to consolidate meetings. So the next meeting that you will see these items is March 2nd. You'll see the first reading of the right-of-way vacation ordinance and the first reading of the rezone ordinance. And then after that will be the final readings of everything where you would consider second reading of the ordinance, second reading of the rezone, and then approval of the project replat, which we saw today. And again, we could act on those now, but the idea is to try and consolidate those meetings so it makes sense when we're talking about all the various elements, how they go together. Should be noted that nothing in the MOA commits the city to approve any of this. So in the framework of the land deal, it's very clear that city council and planning commission have the final say on everything. So it is just by typical processes that these are coming before you. Just so you're aware of some of the other pieces we're working on, so we'll have temporary construction easements, which authorize us use to do the grading and construction work on the land outside of the right-of-way, because it's not just the right-of-way, you got to grade and make everything match. Between when we close on the land and when we actually close the old Woodgate, there's a gap there. So we're getting an easement to allow for public use of that road in between. Otherwise, we'd have to close that road several months before the construction project, which would be a necessary impact on the public. We're tentatively scheduled to close on all of the land for April Fool's Day, April 1st. This project does include some access permitting of CDOT. So, reconfiguration of access points and loading are all fall under the State Highway Access Code, which is CDOT's jurisdiction. So that's underway. Project design is nearly complete. And as part of that, as you can imagine, like any project, we get into the new road, here's actually a snapshot of all the utilities in the area. So a lot of these stay, but there are some utility relocations that are necessary where the road comes into where some existing cabinets and things take care of. So the biggest kind of outlier in that is some of those are out of our control. So we're at the mercy of the utility companies to come in and do the respond and do the work to do the relocations. So far, with one exception, we've always been able to work that out and they've showed up. We had about a 1 month delay on the Sunnyside roundabout when the utility company didn't show up to do the relocations. We engage them, we've been engaging them for 8 months now. So we work to give them plenty of lead time to make sure that they can get it onto their schedules, but that is one element of the project that's somewhat out of our control. So hopefully that comes through. But I just want to throw it out there that that's another project element that we work on and try and keep moving. You can expect, so once the project is, the design is complete and all the land deals are really come together, we will go out to bid with the project. Once that'll be publicly bid, and then you guys would see the current schedule is that you would see that at a work session on April 5th, and then final approval to authorize construction on April 20th. Those are tentative, so there's a lot of pieces that play into that, but that's currently where they're scheduled. So that's after these land actions, that would be the next city council action. And that just approves a contract, just like we do on any other construction project. in that project is budgeted for 2021. So with that, I'll stop sharing, bring my face back, and happy to answer any questions.
That was really thorough information. Thank you so much. I hope that not just a handful of us have an opportunity to see that, because it's such an interesting insight into all the work that goes into what sometimes people think of as a simple project, and it's really fascinating. Are there any questions or comments from my fellow councilors?
I just think it's a real testament to your abilities and your professionalism that we've been seeing this for a long time now. And again, I still feel like that was very informative and very engaging. Well done. And I love the fact that you're pointing out that we have not used eminent domain anywhere in this project, because the misinformation out there in the community is just silly.
Great. Any other comments or questions? I would love to be able to refer back to this presentation of this work session at our future council meetings where we vote on this, because what will end up happening is we won't have a whole lot of discussion at that time. Mr. Murphy will recap it, but we might find someone tuning in and they wish there was more information. And I just think the last few minutes in the packet and the 20-minute video really go a long way to helping the public understand all the pieces that go into a project this big, and especially because there was private property acquisitions, why we had to work with those property owners without necessarily you going around town telling everyone we were going to buy property. Yeah. And I think that's a testament. Your professionalism is what has allowed us to always find common ground with property owners.
Yeah, I want to just, what you said is really important. And I think when this comes to council, whenever that is, the packet should reference that video, and it summarizes everything so well. And for people who missed it before, I think that would be an important point to make as we're presenting it at City Council.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. One thing I can do is I can take an excerpt from this video, take the council packet, and also just make that part of the MoveMo page. So we kind of keep a running comprehensive record of all the discussions. And that'll allow us at the next meeting too, we can reference back to that where people can really see how it all developed. If that sounds, I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay, yep.
That would be great. And then folks wouldn't have to look at a work session and go through 40 minutes to find where you start talking about this. But if you took this piece out and added it to your MoveMo information, that'd be fantastic. Really make it easy for the public to find what they're looking for.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for that.
Great. Any further questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we'll keep moving forward on our agenda. The next one is a contract award recommendation, and this is the information from Jim Scheid, our Public Works Manager, and this is for the Rotary Amphitheater. Construction Manager, General Contractor Contract Award Recommendation. Good morning, Mr. Scheid.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor and Council. So this project also has been in the works for a long time. This is the Rotary Amphitheater. This one happens to be at the construction phase. So this is, I know this one started even before I started working for the city. So this is a 4-year plus project, finally at construction phase. So it's at a milestone right now. And I got to give a shout out to our design team, Delmont Consultants and Chamberlain Architects. They've been with us throughout these last 4 years and keeping up with the multiple design meetings we went through and years of adjusting and tweaking this thing to get it just right. So they've done a very good job, and I think we're all excited that we're at this stage of the project. So for the recommendation, we're asking you to consider the authorization of awarding the budgeted amount of $3.2 million for the project. And that includes several different contracts, and I'll kind of go into that of how all that is calculated. But the largest portion of it is for the CMGC award, which is to Stryker, or recommending to Stryker and Company from right here in Montrose. So I'll kind of go into how we got there and why we're recommending Stryker, and then kind of break down the budget part of it. So we issued an RFP recently for CMGC services. We received 6 very well qualified proposals, which was really encouraging actually and the construction industry in this area is very busy right now. To get 6 very professional proposals was encouraging and good, and a good sign. Doesn't make our choice any easier, but it was a good thing to see. So we shortlisted down to 3, which was Asset Engineering out of Grand Junction, FCI Constructors out of Grand Junction, and Stryker here out of Montrose. Again, all of them very, very good proposals. And we then entered into interviews where we looked at cost estimates, GC costs, where we were able to really kind of refine into their process, the team they're proposing, and their involvement in the community as well too. Like that is a big part of this project. And then as you can see, I included some of the scores from the interviews, but it came out that Stryker really for all of us rose to the top, and kind of at every level what was our choice. So that is what we're recommending is Stryker for the GC award. And so they did provide an estimate for the construction costs with their proposal. And it did line up right where we thought it would, which was encouraging because we've been budgeting for this for many years. So it was a little bit of weight off our shoulders to kind of see the estimates come in right where we anticipated. That was a good sign. And very consistent also. All of the estimates were within just a few percentage of each other. So man, we had a very good and accurate number so far. So through this project, we've been trying to find ways to keep costs down and achieve the goal of having a building that that meets all the needs for all the user groups. So one part of keeping the costs down is we did do the initial part of the project, kind of the access road to the site with our own crews, streets and parks, pitched in a lot here late last year to get the access road portion done to allow kind of a head start to the project. Now the site is accessible and the GC doesn't have to start the road in February because that would be very difficult and probably delay the project. So we've kind of given them a head start a little bit, and we're able to reduce the cost of the project by doing it with our own skills and our own equipment. We were able to reduce the cost quite a bit. And again, we came out right about where we estimated, but the cost or the savings from us doing it was significant. So on to the financial part and how we budgeted for this. So the $3.2 million is to cover all of our costs for the project. That includes owner's costs. So things like our design team support through construction, that's Delmont and Tom Chamberlain to be involved in and assisting the initial construction and throughout construction. So they would be involved in throughout and helping to QC the project, make sure it aligns with their design. Fiber infrastructure to the site. We have fiber currently on the right near the bridge at River Bottom Park. It's on actually on the west side of the river right there. And so this would extend fiber to the amphitheater site. Electrical utility service, which is obviously pretty normal, but we need to get a electrical service there. And it is nearby, near the Crush Refine Trail on the east side of Cerise Park Fields. So it's fairly close. Security and alarm and construction materials testing, those are pretty common things for the owner to provide through a construction project like this. And so those add up to almost $200,000, leaving $3 million of the budget amount left for the GMP contract to Stryker and owner's contingency. Based on our estimates, that we would be under budget. So we would be seeing about a $2.5 million GMP contract with about $250,000 of owner's contingency on top of that, puts us at about $2.75 million in construction costs, including contingencies. And then that means we would be under budget by about $250,000. So We don't have hard numbers yet. Now that's the interesting part of this project is that we have requested estimates from Stryker, but through the CMGC process, now we would enter into the procurement process of all of their subs. So that it's a very open book process in that we are involved in all of their sub selection, it's open book again. So we see their overhead costs, their profit and their markup, and something we agreed to at the beginning now, so that we're able to control those costs. So that with our design package, it lent itself really well to this type of construction contract to where we can work out issues that may come up at the beginning. If it were hard bid, some of those come back as change orders where now we're able to work closely with them, refine the budget down to an exact dollar amount, and then sign a contract for a GMP. So they will still be held to that. They will be tied to a GMP amount and cannot exceed that. And so my request is that you authorize up to the $3.2 million amount, and then we award a GMP contract that keeps us under that budgeted amount. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well enough? Okay. Well, with that, I would take any questions. I know it was pretty quick, but this is a project we've had for a long time and have talked about multiple times. So I'd be happy to answer any questions there are or review any more further.
I see 2 hands up. We'll go first, Mayor Pro Tem Glasswell, and then to Councilor Frank.
I'd just like to thank Bill and Jim for the work they've done. I think they both know that I was skeptical first. I know we required a little property for additional parking, and I think the project, it looks fantastic. I've spent some time with Jim down there looking at the area, and I think it's a fantastic area to put this in. So I'm in total support of the program.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, I've been involved since the very beginning of this, and I'm really excited to see this come forward. I would like a little, as it comes available, a little more clarity on the timeline when we're having things brought to us and when we're being given information on construction starts, breaking ground, potential finish times, and so on. So just as the project moves forward, more clarity on that would be really helpful. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, to start off, we would give a notice to proceed with the GMP contract, which likely would be by mid-February, so fairly soon. And then they would break ground, I would think right away. There's snow on the ground right now, so they're limited a little bit, but there's a lot of work to do on the hillside in the amphitheater seating area. And that's a lot of moving dirt, and they can do that now. So likely there would be dirt moved by late February. Notice to proceed would be probably mid-February. So yeah, very, very quickly. And then also,
and our total completion is expected by November 1, right?
That's right.
Hoping we'd be done earlier, but we're looking at different options for the grass seating area, and got to get started early on that as well so it can take root.
Yep, that's right. November 1st was kind of the deadline, but is definitely expected before that. I think it's very possible to be earlier than that. But we made it a milestone as part of the project to have established turf prior to the project being completed. So it's not like they're going to seed it the day before the project is finished. It'll be established turf with the intention of that when it's open, it's usable, that we're not waiting on muddy turf to become established, that when it's the day it's opened, it is available for use.
And as we get closer, obviously we'll gauge COVID and where we're at as a community. And if we even think there's a possibility of doing a grand opening celebration with some music right around that October, November timeline, we'll try to make that happen. But we didn't want to wait and have the grass not be available till next spring of the following year. We want to be able to go.
Any other questions or comments from council? I don't see any. Thank you very much for presenting that. That's great. The next thing on our agenda is, I'm going back to page 1, is item D, which is the 2021 equipment purchase recommendation, which is also our Public Works Manager, Jim Scheid.
Yep, that's me again. So this is for a purchase recommendation for 2 pieces of equipment. One being a Craftco crack seal machine and the other being a Vermeer wood chipper. So these are the crack seal machine, I guess, is probably the more dramatic of the one, in that our crack seal program has really taken off recently, and I think that's something we've focused a lot on and trying to be better at and really evaluate our efficiencies. We've come down to the machine we were using or are using right now is definitely limiting our output. It's small for the scope that we are requesting our crew to do. And so that is part of the reason. And also the one we're using has been used and abused. We've definitely put a lot of material through it. The guys are doing a really good job, but it's time to improve and get a new machine that can keep up with them, really. So this new machine obviously has higher capacity, higher BTU output, dual wands, and just upgraded in general to be a safer operation. So so that, along with the wood chipper, is along the same way we've used the one we have. It is not quite to the capacity we'd like to see a wood chipper. So kind of along the same lines, it's due for replacement. And so we included in our budget. This is actually part of the fleet replacement budget, but also the upgrade portion of it goes to the streets division is where the upgrade portion comes from. The replacement portion is out of our fleet division. And so we have budgeted $115,000 for the crack seal machine and $71,600 for the wood chipper. And again, the upgrade portion gets split off a little bit, but the overall budget is that. And DISCO has participated in a cooperative purchasing agreement. We've used these before, but I know it takes a little bit of explaining because they're not normal, or they're not easy to explain. But this is an RFP that was issued by a different government agency that DISCO agreed to give these prices to other government agencies. So it's basically like a state bid. I don't know if that's a common term, but this is actually nationwide. So it's a little bit different than a state bid in that it's available for anybody in the nation to bid on. And then also any government agency to then piggyback on those awards. And so this is a Sourcewell cooperative agreement, again, available throughout the country. We utilize it for things like this when we're looking for a major name brand. If we're looking for a Craftco machine or a Vermeer wood chipper, that's where they make sense. If this were something that could have been manufactured in Montrose, we wouldn't use a cooperative agreement. We would issue our own RFP. But like I said, in this case, we're looking for a nationwide brand that we can then use a vendor to service and get parts for in the future. So that's why sometimes we use those and sometimes we don't. In this case, it makes sense. So with these 2 pieces combined, we would be well under budget. It looks like we have $19,231 in savings combined between the 2 from what we budgeted compared to what the contract price is on the Sourcewell cooperative agreement. So with that, we're recommending purchase a Craftco crack seal machine from DISCO and a Vermeer wood chipper from Vermeer, both of which are under budget.
Thank you very much. The packet information is really thorough, including pictures, if anyone wants to see what these machines look like.
I figure the pictures always help.
You know, that's fantastic, especially when we have an electronic packet. It's not a matter of quote unquote wasting paper because we can just scroll through and look at them. Any comments or questions from fellow council members? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on. And the next item is for more equipment purchase, this time to be used at the Black Canyon Golf Course. And so Jim Scheid will tell us about this equipment.
That's right. Yep. So more equipment. Very, very similar story in that these are scheduled for replacement. These happen to all 4 be at the golf course, in which we've been been moving towards and are actually currently using Toro equipment at the golf course and trying to keep that fairly standard. Have had very good experience with Toro. And so, again, these are part of the fleet replacement. These are not upgrades, so these are completely covered by the fleet budget to replace these pieces of equipment. This is also a cooperative purchase agreement. So Toro has entered into an agreement as well. And we purchased from Toro last year as well and found that they've been a very good company to work with, and they also match the equipment that we have. So I put a breakdown on the packet that kind of shows the price per equipment. But at the bottom, we're at $177,900 for all 4 pieces of equipment with the attachments. So they come with reels and pieces to make them function. So in this case, though, our fleet budget is under the amount is less than the cost of the equipment. Now this happens for maybe a couple of reasons. One, when we budget for replacements, we are projecting into the future. So we buy a piece of equipment today, we put a 3% inflation on that piece of equipment, and then planning on replacing it in 10 years or whatever the life of the equipment is. And so the fleet budget collects that from the department, and overall fleet-wide that works. So we see that the 3% inflation on equipment works very well because some things are going to be under that, and some things, like in this case, may be under it. But overall, 3% for a fleet replacement budget works well. We are under budget for fleet replacement, but on these 4 pieces of equipment, we are actually over our budget. But I don't feel like there's a concern for the amount that fleet has budgeted this year, in that just in other replacements we have discussed already this year. There's I got a number here. Well, the overall budget, I guess I did not assign a number to it. Sorry about that. There's a total of 1.2 million budgeted for total fleet replacements. And we've seen in other recommendations already that we are well under budget. The Ford purchase, as well as the Craftco and Vermeer purchases, we are well under budget already. So the additional amount here, the $36,400, will not cause our fleet replacement to go over budget. Does that make sense? Explain that okay? So with that, we are recommending purchase from LL Johnson, which is the Toro rep in this region, to buy the 4 pieces of equipment for the Black County Golf Course.
Thank you. What kinds of questions or comments do we have from council? So if there was new equipment, it would come out of a different budget, but because it's all replacement, it comes out of fleet, right? Like we just saw in the prior item, where part of it came out of fleet and part of it came out of a different budget. That's right. Yep. If it's an additional piece of equipment, the division that it's going to is going to pay for it up front. And then the fleet collects from that division over the life of that vehicle to replace it. And so all these vehicles have been collected for over their life to be replaced. And I guess that is something unique also about the golf course equipment, is that when the golf course was purchased, the original purchase value of that equipment was estimated. And that may be why we are under what the replacement cost is now, in that we didn't know the exact initial cost. It was acquired with the golf course. And so that may be part of why it is where it is. But either way, that's why we use a flat rate of 3% inflation across everything, in that it's a fairly safe assumption that some things we may see there are going to be more than that, but overall the fleet will be less than that. Great, thank you. I don't think I saw any other hands or anyone unmuting themselves, so I think that council feels like we have all the information we need on these equipment purchases. Fantastic. We look forward to seeing them at upcoming council meeting for the official vote and approval. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Going back to our agenda, the next item and the last formal item on our agenda is the 2021 Annexation Plan. And I will turn this over to the City Senior Planner, Amy Sharpe. Oh, Mr. Frank, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out for the public that all of this information that we're talking about in our packet is available to the public at any point. So if you want to see this information, you can certainly find it. You just have to contact City Clerk Lisa Del Piccolo, and she'll get you on that email list to get those packets available.
Yep, absolutely. And or they are available anytime on the city website. Okay, so moving on. So Senior Planner Amy Sharpe.
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'll start with sharing my screen here. All right. So as you mentioned, I'm just giving an overview of the 2021 annual annexation report and our 3-mile plan, and this will come before City Council regular session in the future. Our 2021 annual annexation report is stipulated by Colorado state statutes, and this plan will fulfill the statutory requirements to have a plan in place to annex new properties in 2021. So this is an overview of the 3-mile plan, what we'll be discussing today. We'll talk about the nature of the plan, our annexation policies, our priorities, a little bit about the city's utility infrastructure, road infrastructure, our parks, trails, and open space, utilities, general provisions, and then recent annexations that we've done over the past couple of years. So as I stated, the city is required to file a plan every year. So you guys are probably familiar with this, those of you that have been on council for a while, and you see it usually in January of every year. It describes proposed land uses, utility and street infrastructure services that are all within 3 miles of the city of Montrose, and the comprehensive plan and updates incorporated to the comprehensive plan are also included in this. So this map just shows you our the growth boundary, which is kind of this double line here that's kind of a dark yellow, and then the red is our 3-mile buffer, the 3-mile boundary. So our annexation policy is basically that we annex out from the center of the city into our 3 growth areas, which we have some maps all in your exhibits there, and we'll kind of go through those a little bit too, but you can look at your exhibits to see the maps of our growth areas. And when we talk about what kind of areas that we're going to consider for annexation, it's usually driven by property owner requests for annexation, followed by qualified enclaves within the city, sometimes city-owned properties like you guys saw last year that we did, or areas that are expected to develop as urban within the city influence areas and within city service areas. So this kind of reiterates what I just said. These are kind of how we determine our priorities for annexation. Almost always it's driven by property owner requests. We did have some last year, city-owned properties like the Rainbow Trout Edition and some of our county road right-of-ways that were just enclaves and things that we needed to clean up. But in general, we work off of private landowner requests. So these are the eligible enclaves within the city limits. And I did have GIS take a look at this, and these are all privately owned right now. So basically these would come before us at a time when the private landowner requests annexation. And again, I kind of show some different exhibits on here too, so you can look in your packet to see some of those different exhibits. So this is our growth areas map, as I just talked about, and you guys see this a lot when we do annexations. We try to annex from the center of town, which is growth area 1. It's red on this map, and then moving out to growth area 2, where there's some infrastructure nearby, and then growth area 3 being kind of the last priority for annexation. So annexations are subject to our comprehensive plan and our city code. We have a variety of water service areas, as many of you are familiar with, but I included that map as we generally do to show and just bring everybody up to date on where all of our different water service areas are in our area. The extension of sewer service in accordance with the wastewater service and treatment agreement with the city, the county, and West Montrose Sanitation District. And really a lot of these service lines are, and the extensions of them are precipitated by growth. So the road infrastructure, this is something we look at a lot when we're doing annexations. We take a look at obviously where our current and our proposed roads and streets are going to go. So this is from our comprehensive plan, and that's our proposed connections and improvements for, you know, our major arterials, minor arterials, different things like that. So lots of times when we're doing annexations, as you guys have seen over the last year, we try to make sure that the right-of-ways for these proposed roads are kind of preserved in those annexations as well. This map just shows our parks, trails, and open space from our 2008 comprehensive plan. So this shows kind of our parks master plan of where we have existing parks, trails, and open space and where we would like to see ones in the future, as well as recreational trail alignments. And once again, when we do annexations, we try to look at our comprehensive plan to make sure that those annexations are in line with our comp plan and that they preserve some of these corridors for future use. This is, so I put in your packet, and I'm not going to read through all these because I know everybody knows how to read, and it's on the website too, but this is just a list of all the different city and public utilities. So I listed them out by categories, and then you can see in your packet all the different utilities that are available in our area. So general provisions. To the extent that any item mentioned in this section is not reflected in the documents, the maps, plans, included as a part of this plan shall not be construed to mean that these types of facilities are not provided. And the second provision is that proposed land uses are residential and agricultural, except as otherwise shown or provided by city zoning, our land use plan, or the comprehensive plan. So you guys see that a lot when we bring forward an annexation and ask for the proposed zoning. You'll see that what the surrounding zoning is in the area as well when we ask for the zoning for the new parcel. So here's the fun part. This kind of shows you what we did last year, just this 2020. I felt like it was a whole lot more, but it sure wasn't. If you look in your packet, it kind of compares this year to the last 2 years before too. And it actually was right in line. We kind of did the same amount as we've done over the last couple of years. So it just was newer to me. So it felt like a lot, but it was about the same. This list that we did about 63.6 acres. One thing to note, this one's, it might be kind of hard to read, but there are 5. So the one kind of in the lower left corner, it looks like one big parcel because there's like this red outline and then this green in the center. The part to the south is the river crossing addition, but this little slither that goes up north, that was the Unright addition too. So it was really tiny. So that's the 5th one when you're looking, and then there's the Woodgate one's kind of right in here, which is really tiny, and then the Hilltop addition, and then the one way up north was 4152. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. I think that I'll say this because if I don't, someone else on council will say this. But when we look at those properties which are eligible for annexation, that should in no way mean the city has plans to make those landowners annex them. That it doesn't mean the city wants to annex them. It doesn't mean we're going to knock on their door and double check with them. Those are just the properties that could be annexed. And I think that's really important to understand. Right. I see a lot of council nodding their heads, so I knew that someone would bring it up.
Yeah, and it's usually driven by them wanting to further develop their property or because they're wanting to come on to city utilities. So,
right, so they approach us and it's great. Any other comments or questions from council? Mr. Glassball.
I would just comment on the map showing the different water districts. We have several water districts in the area, but water is supplied from one entity, and that's the facility out east of town that supplies all these. So it doesn't really matter where you live and which water district you're on. We're all receiving the same supply.
Good point.
Your bill is just due to a different entity, but same water. Yep. Other comments or questions from council? Mr. Anderson? No, there you go.
Unmute button. I think all these maps are on the website too, correct, Amy? And
correct.
I find the one that shows all the arterials and minor arterials is important for homeowners to be aware of, because You know, sometimes people get agitated when we're moving, or not moving, but doing work on a road and connecting it with something else. And all of a sudden traffic increases, and it's all part of this plan. So I think it's good that this is all on the web. It's available to anyone. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It doesn't look like we have any more questions on this agenda item. So at this point, we'll go back to first page, and we have general city council discussion. Is there any item that my fellow councilors would like to introduce, bring up, discuss? You have another shot tonight at 6 o'clock. So if you think of, there you go, Councilor Frank.
I just wanted to say that sitting through this work session, that anybody that's watching, we are so lucky to have our staff here in Montrose, Mr. Murphy, Mr. Scheid, Ms. Sharpe, all of them are just such incredible professionals that the amount of information we're provided is so thorough, complete, and well organized that it just makes doing these a lot easier. I just want to say thank you to those staff members, and especially to the Bill and Ann too. Great job, great job.
Absolutely, and let me just tell you a little surprise for 2021, and that is that our city clerk and some of our other city staff have been working really hard on bringing us a new agenda software. So all of this great information we get will be presented with really fantastic software going forward that'll allow us to navigate through these packets and allow our staff to put together amazing agendas. And I can't wait for you all to see it. It'll be unrolled and unveiled later this year with the appropriate training. So, okay.
Madam Mayor, if I can just add to that. So we just finalized the City Beat newsletter that'll go out soon. And in there, we're highlighting the new financial transparency software that's available to the public. And so it's up and running. There's a few bugs to work out, as there always is when you do a new platform, but we have some staff members pretending they're just general citizens looking through the entire website to see if it's user-friendly and make sure we work out a lot of those bugs before the newsletter gets into the hands of the public and they can go on and find everything they want to know about our finances.
Gosh, I double tap my microphone and then I unmute and remute myself so quickly. That's great. We've been looking forward to re-implementing that financial transparency software. And we decided to do that a while ago, and it just takes time to roll something like that out. And so I'm excited to hear that we are almost at the finish line. That's great.
I just wanted to make a closing comment, and that is, I wanted to thank the folks, I think they're all gone now, but that made that childcare proposal. And I want to thank my colleagues for interesting discussion. I think it's that's the whole point of work session. We share ideas, and so I learned a lot, and I appreciate my colleagues' perspectives and the things they discuss. So it was a really good work session. Thank you all.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed that. Other general city council discussion before I go to staff. I'm seeing y'all. Okay, we do have a city council meeting tonight because it's Tuesday and yesterday was a holiday. We do our work session and then a council meeting again tonight. So if you think of something, you have another shot today to address it, announce it, or celebrate it. So with that, I will ask about staff comments, and I saw that Shani Wittenberg turned on her video, which makes me think perhaps she has a comment or an update for us.
Well, it was a great meeting, and I just wanted to start planning the 2022 budget, which requires a couple of meetings on your calendars. So I was hoping to get some input, and we can even move this to the next work session if you'd like. But I was thinking maybe June 3rd for the big picture meeting where we all get together and kind of discuss where we're at and where we want to go. And then maybe September 16th for the retreat for city council. So those are just proposed. Definitely want your feedback. And Bill and Ann, I checked your calendars. I think they're pretty open for most of the staff. I'm sure there's little meetings that we need to move.
Would the June 3rd be a council meeting or a staff meeting? I was confused.
Sorry, it would be the big picture meeting where the land department heads get together and talk about the future.
Okay. Okay, so if you guys want to check your calendars and then give any thoughts you have about those dates to Shani, that would be great. Any other staff comments for our work session? I don't see any. Okay, so I think we can adjourn with 5 minutes short of our allotted 2-hour window. I knew it would be a long work session. I'm glad that we didn't hold anyone over, and we will see everyone tonight for a city council meeting, regularly scheduled 6 p.m. start. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone who joined our work session today.